What's up, everybody? I'm Dusti Martin with Corcoran Platinum Living. Today, by popular demand, we are going to be talking about the absolute best things and worst things you can do to get a return on your budget when upgrading your home. So buckle up, let's go. All right, so straight out of the box, when I sell homes, I work with a lot of buyers, and a lot of times they're younger buyers or buyers with a lower budget, and so they end up shopping for the ugliest house in the best neighborhood with the intention of upgrading it over time, which naturally in a couple months I start getting the questions, hey, what's the best way to update? What are the best home improvements? What should I do, not do, etc. So I went and I asked some appraisers, and this is what they told me. First and foremost, adding livable permitted square footage. The thing is, though, you need to be careful not to over improve. So have your favorite realtor look up in your MLS and in your local neighborhood the homes that are selling, what condition they're in, and what the size overall looks like. And then when you go to improve, try not to go too far overboard. I do have one client in my database who came to me a year or two ago wanting to buy a home, but also needs to sell his big home. And to be honest, when I went to pull the comps, it was almost impossible because his home was almost double the size of any other home for miles. And so if you go too far overboard, you're going to have some appraisal issues down the road because there won't be anything to compare it to. So try to look at the homes, the average. If you're within 10, 15% of the size, great, but don't go so overboard that you're increasing the home by 50 or 100%. In most neighborhoods, that's going to be a waste of your time and money. But if this is your forever home and you really know that you're going to spend the next 20 or 30 years there, it might be worth it depending on the cost of doing it. Just keep in mind that when it comes time to sell, there may not be anybody to compare your home to in the future. But overall, adding livable square space that's permitted, that's on the tax records, is the way to go. Most homes are sold by the square foot, so every square foot more you have versus the others, say the one next door sold for $220, just by adding a little bit of space from yours, you can increase the value. All right, number 2, updating kitchens and bathrooms. Again, be mindful not to overdo it. Take a look at what the neighbors have done, are doing, what is selling in your neighborhood, what is not selling in your neighborhood, and then compare the price difference between the homes that have been updated and the homes that haven't. If nobody in your neighborhood is doing these like big custom cabinets, but they are doing granite, that's something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is most professionals recommend that you update your kitchens and baths about every 10 years. So as a little money saving tip, you want to create a sinking fund to budget for that so you're not having to finance it. And then that way, if the day ever comes where you do need to sell your home, it's already updated or recently been updated within the last 5 years or so, and you're not really out anything, and it's still the prettiest home in the neighborhood, but it's not overdone. So keep that in mind. Lastly, you want to look at your landscaping. If somebody's looking at a bare lot and then the next person over has beautiful garden, lawn, xeriscape, whatever it is, that's going to be taken into consideration both by the appraiser and by the buyer. The buyer, not every buyer is going to walk in and say, I can make it what I want. Not everybody wants a project. So your landscaping, the time and effort you put in there is going to have the biggest ROI when it comes to updating and renovating your home. Now, the 3 things these appraisers said not to do, let's get into that. So number 1, solar. Solar is not going to add a lot of value to your home unless you own it outright, meaning you haven't leased it, you haven't financed it in any way, and it's transferable, and somebody else in the neighborhood has also bought their solar system outright, meaning they no longer owe anything on it. It's not leased or financed in any way. Nobody has to assume any payments, and that they can show a value between that home and maybe one that didn't have solar or didn't have purchased solar. So keep that in mind, because a buyer's going to have to qualify to assume your loan. And most of the time, most appraisers unfortunately, they're like agents. They're not all created the same, and a lot of them are not going to add any value. Especially, I've had one listing where the home was a financed purchase, so it wasn't leased, it was purchased but financed. But every single home in this new build community had that. Therefore, it didn't make it anything special, and we got no value on the appraisal for that. I've seen it time and time again where we don't get any extra benefit unless we can prove to the appraiser that we spent X amount. The house down the street that also had fully owned outright solar sold for more. And so it's just one of those things. People think it's going to actually like increase their value, but it doesn't really. A new AC, a lot of people will think, oh, well, it's got a new AC, that's worth something. Unfortunately, an AC, unless you absolutely need one, is considered basic maintenance and something every house needs to have, especially in Arizona. If you don't have an air conditioner, your home's not even going to be livable. Swamp coolers aren't even really around anymore, except for in much older homes, and most of those have even been converted to an AC system versus a swamp. So most of the time, that's not going to add any value because the appraiser is just going to see it and say, yeah, every house needs an AC, otherwise we couldn't live here. It will make it easier to sell, especially if it's an older home. It'll be one less thing for the buyer to worry about, but it won't necessarily add value. Last but not least, and this one is a giant suck of your time and money, and that would be putting in a pool. It is far better to buy a home that already has a pool than put one in yourself. A pool to put in is going to cost you minimum $30,000 for something really basic. In some neighborhoods, you're looking $35,000, $50,000 even. But you're only going to get like $10,000 to $15,000 back in the home's value, if that, depending on the age of the pool and the type of pool that you put in. And so when you think about it, pools over time, they kind of depreciate because they're going to have to be resurfaced. They're going to have major work done at some point in the future, 10, 15, 20, 30 years out. That whole thing is going to need to be completely redone. And so it's kind of like driving a new car off the lot. It's $50,000 one day, and the minute you drive it off the lot, it depreciates almost immediately. So keep that in mind. Now, like I said above, if this is your forever home and you're going to be there for the next 20, 30 years, maybe it's worth it. If it's going to bring that much enjoyment to you and your family and making memories, then do it. But if you're moving into an area and you know you really want a pool, I would consider looking for homes that already have the pool. Anyway, if you have any questions, give me a call, 480-717-9405, or visit my website at dustimartinrealtor.com. Oh, and don't forget to hit subscribe.